So you bounced around a little bit earlier in your career, but you spent a few years with USA Today, and then you left that on your own in 2017, right? Like you didn't lose the job, you chose to leave.
Yep.
So that's not an easy decision to make. It's not easy to give up job security. Why did you make that decision?
Well, I will say I would have liked to stay, but my wife, she works at a children's hospital, and she had just got done with her schooling and stuff that she needs for her job, like the specialized license that she needs. And it's hard to get the job that she does. She's a child life specialist, so she was having to make like a nationwide search. She had to go do an internship, she had to do like a practicum, and then land a job. And we were living in Charlotte, North Carolina, where all the teams are, the NASCAR teams. And so I had told USA Today at the time, like, hey, like I'm probably going to be moving, based on where my wife goes, and I'll just travel the races from there. And at the time, we had a sports editor who was pretty new and like knew nothing about NASCAR, and he was like floored that I would leave the NASCAR headquarters area of North Carolina. And I tried to explain to him, like, well, I mean, you do like 90% of the job with NASCAR is done at the track. You talk to all the drivers at the track, cover the race at the track, and there's really no home races, so to speak, for NASCAR. Like they're traveling somewhere different every week. So everybody's flying wherever. So it doesn't really matter where I fly from, I felt. And I remember this guy, he's like, no, that would be like having our Notre Dame beat writer not live in South Bend. So he's like, I can't let you move. So I'm like, well, all right, like you're kind of putting me in a tough spot here. So I quit. Like once my wife found a job, I was like, hey man, like I'm moving here. Are you sure? Like I can't move. He's like, no, I can't move. I'm like, all right, well, I'm out. Like I'm not going to tell my wife you can't go help sick children, because I got to stay in North Carolina I don't even think I need to. So at the time, like nobody, it was really scary because nobody was doing Patreon stuff. Nobody had Substack. And I had seen that I listened to the Survivor podcast, because I'm a fan of Survivor, the TV show, reality show. And at the end of the podcast, this guy was always like, hey, like if you like our podcast, support us on Patreon. I was like, what is Patreon? Like, what is it? So I like looked into it, and there wasn't, any success stories that I could see at the time, but I had like a large enough Twitter following. I just thought, like, look, I'll just put it out there. Like I'll start a site, I'll start a podcast, and I'll just say, like, listen, if you like my stuff, here's how you can support me. Here's how you can keep me at the track. And, I'll travel, do my stuff, keep doing the same coverage that you've been doing just for myself. If not, like, no worries. I get it. Like, if you don't want to give me $5 a month, $10 a month, whatever, that's fine. But like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm going to have to work at Starbucks or something. I don't know, and I was sort of just braced for like, I don't know how this is going to go, but like within a week, the support was so much, it just worked. It took off, and I was able to make a living from it. So I was really lucky, I think, timing wise then, because now, like, I don't know if I could do it. Like if I had to do it again, like everybody has a Substack now, right? Like everybody has a Patreon, like everybody's asking you for $5 a month. So I don't know that I could replicate that, but at the time it was new enough. No streaming services, Peacock, all that stuff. They were asking you for their little bit. And I think I just kind of like got a sweet spot timing wise, and it worked.
Right. You were the first person asking somebody to essentially subscribe to you, as opposed to being now like, this is the 15th subscription that you're going to be paying for.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then did you stay with using it as a Patreon, or did you go behind a paywall at some point, like after it started to be a little bit successful?
Yeah, I always kept it on Patreon. I just felt like it was a lot better model for me, because I thought if I took it behind a paywall, then you really limit your exposure. And how would people know that they want to subscribe, or they think it's valuable enough to use it for free for a while, and then be like, you know what, I actually do listen to this podcast a lot, or I do read this website a lot. And sure, there's some people who are never going to pay, right? Like that's by nature. Like they're just like, I'm not going to pay for this. But I mean, I get that at the Athletic now. People are like, I'm not paying for anything behind a paywall, period. So there's always going to be that element of it. But I just thought, if I take my audience behind a paywall, then nobody would ever really know what product I'm trying to offer because they won't see my coverage. So I kept it free, and I was lucky to have enough people supporting it that it kind of paid for everybody else in a sense.
Did you offer some exclusive content? Like if you pay this much, you get this?
I did, and it was fascinating to me, and it still is. I've never figured out. I wanted to give the people that were paying, especially because I gave an option. Like it was like you pay whatever you want, right? Like there's different levels, and I wanted to give the people who were paying the most, like racks. Like I'd be like, hey, I'll give you a 30-minute phone call with me once a month, or the other people, we'll do a live stream, on Zoom or whatever it was at the time, right? Skype or I don't know. Um, and it was crazy because not that many people took me up on it. Like what I discovered was the people that were paying even the high dollar amounts, they mostly didn't want something from you. They just wanted to show their support. They weren't like, I'm doing this so I can get that 30-minute phone call and you better call me. You know what I mean? Like I'd be like, hey, does anybody want the call? Like some people do it, but a lot of people are like, no, I'm good. I just want to support. Like keep doing your thing. And so what I found was it was just it wasn't like you were trying to sell them a product. It was just that they wanted to be part of something and feeling like they had a stake in supporting you and getting out there. So I just referred to everybody as like my bosses and be like, all right, here's my bosses, and because I'm working directly for them. And I think people enjoyed just being like, yeah, like what if I had a moment that got some traction or went viral or a video of a fight or something, they enjoyed like having a stake in that. Like, yeah, that guy's there because I helped get him there, and that was so interesting, like such a weird thought experiment for me in a way.
Right. They could almost feel proud of your work as opposed to just enjoying your work.
Totally.
Yeah, I think one of the concerns that I would have if I were doing that is just the fact that like with a paywall, at least and I totally get the Patreon thing makes much more sense from a standpoint of the exposure, and that's really cool that it worked for you for those few years. Just the fact though that you really don't know month to month what you're going to be getting, and I'm sure if you saw a boost at the beginning, you're just kind of wondering like, well, is this what it's going to be? Or is this just kind of like people almost feeling bad that I left USA Today? So here's some money. And is it now going to stick?
Yeah. And it was crazy too, because there would be fluctuations month to month based on how NASCAR, like if NASCAR did something, which happens frequently in NASCAR, to like make people mad, or like an officiating decision they didn't like, or a rules change. And one thing in NASCAR is people like, I'm done with this. I'm not going to watch this anymore. I get a lot of people be like, hey man, sorry, but like I'm not watching anymore, so I'm not going to subscribe to your $10 a month. And I'd be like, dang, like, well, I didn't have anything to do with this. Sometimes you'd get a boost and it would offset that, but sometimes you'd be like, well, now I have $300 less this month than I had last month, and there was no way to predict it. I got lucky too because I ended up with The Athletic before the pandemic, and I tried to keep doing this through the pandemic. I don't know if that I would have survived, because then when we were all in lockdown, could I have been asking people for $10 a month when people were losing jobs, and that could have been really dicey. So it wasn't the most stable long-term thing. And certainly, I didn't have health insurance, right? And I was trying to start a family. So that all those things play into it. I'm sure that if I'd stuck with it and grown it enough, I could have withstood any little downturns, but who knows what would happen? I really don't know. I've thought about it a lot. Like, man, what if I kept that going? Would it have crashed out? Would I have still been afloat? Well, I don't know, but yeah, it was definitely unpredictable.